gospel, did anyone catch that beautiful half verse that talks about family security, that talks about a dream that a lot of people would like to go back to? Did anyone catch it? Well, let's take a look at a section, verse 5, 6, and 7 of the 11th chapter of Luke, and we're going to find it in that section. Now we're going to start at the top, and as I travel down, hopefully you might see it. Jesus said to them, suppose one of you is a friend to whom he goes out at midnight and says, friend, lend me 3 loaves of bread, for a friend of mine has arrived at my house from a journey. I have nothing to offer him. And he says in reply from within, do not bother me. The door has already been locked, and my children and I are already in bed. I cannot get up to give you anything. Do you see it there? Now, we made it a little easy because we made that font size just a little bit bigger. But take a look, it's 2 lines up from the bottom. And there it is, my children and I are already in bed. What exactly does that mean? What kind of a blessing is that? You know, one of the most interesting priests I've ever met in my life is the priest for the Diocese of Greensburg, died about a year ago, Father Don. Father Don Trexler was his full name. Father Don had a very interesting life. He was ordained a priest at the age of, I believe it was 59 or 60. But before he was ordained a priest, when he was a young man, he was an engineer, married. He and his wife had 7 children. One of his daughters I graduated with from high school. And after he and his wife raised their children, his wife got sick, very sick. She died, passed away. And after a period of time after his wife died, he felt called to the priesthood. So he contacted the diocese, and the diocese accepted into the seminary program, and again, he was ordained about the age of 59, 60. He was assigned to a small parish just outside of Uniontown. I was assigned to a parish in Uniontown, and he and I would get together once a month and would have lunch together. And then after lunch, either at his rectory or my rectory, we'd go back and we'd just talk about life. And I enjoyed my conversations with him because, one, he understood the priesthood as I did, but he understood something greater than a priesthood. He understood fatherhood. Being the father of 7 children, he understood daddyhood. He had the integration of the scriptures and what they would mean for a priest, but more importantly, as a father, as a dad. And whenever we would get together once a month and we'd go back to the rectories, his or mine, and we would have these great conversations. What we always did is we'd look at the gospel reading for the coming Sunday and try to dissect that gospel reading to try to determine what we would talk about at Mass. In one Monday, we're working on the coming Sunday's gospel reading, and it's coming out of the 11th chapter of Luke, verses 1 to 11, the very gospel, the full text I just read. And we got the verse, actually it's verse 7. And when we read that section, my children and I are already in bed. He said to me, Kenny, what a blessing that I had. I never realized it. He said, as a father, as a dad, and again, you don't get the opportunity to speak to a father who's a priest, a dad who's a priest. So I held on to every word this man spoke to me, especially knowing of him because his daughter and I went to school together. It's kind of amazing how life has those connections eventually. And he said to me, and I'm sure every parent here will affirm what he said to me, when you have children, you never stop worrying. He said, my kids are all grown, but I worry about every one of them. He said, when I saw that line, my children and I are already in bed, he said, I think back to the days of my greatest blessing. He said, when all my 7 kids were little and they were all in my house, and every night I'd go to each room, make sure they're in their bed, tuck them in, give them a kiss, tell them goodnight. And when I went to my bedroom to put my head on my pillow, I slept like a baby. Because I knew every one of my kids, they were accounted for in bed, safe and sound under my roof. I knew where they were. He said, that's a dream come true for a parent. And then he said to me, when his first child got old enough and left the nest, he experienced something he hadn't experienced up to that point, because after that point, all 6 of the 7 of the kids were always in bed. He knew where they were. But when the first one went off to college, he said, that night I got in bed and I put my head on a pillow and I worried even more. Are they safe? What are they doing? Are they being hurt by someone? He said, and one after another, after another, after another, as they grew up and left the house, that's what I wanted them to do. I gave them education and wings so they could lead their own life. But the negative residual of that, it just caused me more and more and more worry. And finally, after my wife passed and all my kids were out on their own, he said I'd get in bed and I couldn't sleep at all. Because I'd worry about every one of them. One would come to mind, I'd worry about them. Two would come to mind, I'd worry about those two, plus the one I was worrying about. I'd be worrying about all of them. I lost my peaceful sleeps. And the interesting thing about this fella is that now, when we were talking some years ago, he was literally marrying some of his kids as a priest, baptizing nearly all of his grandchildren. What a life he led. He had that integration of priesthood, fatherhood, understanding the scriptures from both perspectives. He said to me, that's a gift. He said, I would give anything to have those days when I could get all 7 of my kids, put them back in my house one night and kiss them all good night, and then I could have a great night's sleep because I know where they're all at. He said, but those days are gone and they're never coming back. Every so often, 1 or 2 will come to visit me, and when I tell them good night, if they're staying with me, then I don't have to worry about that 1 or 2, but I got to worry about the other 5. He said, you know, Kenny said, any parent that reads that line, any mom and dad right now that is still raising their kids, that's a blessing. That's one of those small blessings in life that's not going to last. So if you're a mom and dad at Mass and you're still raising your kids because they're still small and you can still have the opportunity to kiss them goodnight at nighttime and go to your room to have your own sleep, you say to yourself, what a blessing and gift that is. My children and I are in bed in my house, and I know they're all safe and sound. But as he described to me well, and I suspect many moms and dads here have grown kids or out of the house, and you wonder where they're at, and you worry, worry, worry. Then at night you say to yourself, where are they? Are they safe? Are they sound? And what was interesting about this fellow is even after being a priest, he was a priest already, and we were talking about 8 years. And even as a priest, he was the dad of 7 children. At that time, I think he had about 11 grandchildren. It was just amazing. I love speaking to this man. He said to me, I worry now more than ever because the world my kids have to live in, the world my grandkids have to live in, is a much different world than when I raised my kids. He said, I thought when I raised my kids back in the 60s and 70s, that was a difficult time to raise kids. I think it's even more difficult now. But he would know better than anyone. And when he shared that with me, I said to him, you know, Don, I would have never caught that because I'm only a priest, not a daddy. So I would never caught that line, my children and I are already in bed, but you did because you understood the integration of priesthood to fatherhood. You understood the connection. He said, Kenny, whenever I see that gospel reading, I always tell people, love your blessings. Appreciate the blessings that God has given to you in your life. And we have many blessings we don't know we have until they're gone, and once they're gone, they cannot be retrieved. For him, but he now has passed. But before he passed, and once he passed, he got total comfort now. He sleeps good. But before he passed, and every parent with grown kids no longer living in your house, he said that is a dream that you have, to have your children in bed in your house, safe and sound and secure. For any mom or dad here this morning who you're still raising your little ones, that's still in your house, what a blessing that is. My children and I are already in bed. I don't want to get up. I don't want this time to move on. Because before I know it, next time I turn my head, they're all going to be grown and out of my house, and then my worry just intensifies. But he was right. He said to me, Kenny, there are many blessings in life that we have and we don't even realize we have. And once they're gone, we cannot get them back. I think for all moms and dads, for all family members, because even as adults, sometimes you think about life, you say to yourself, I would give anything to be back home with my parents so they could worry about life, not me. That's a great line. My children and I are already in bed. We all have blessings. It's unfortunate we don't realize the blessings we have sometimes until they're gone, and once they're gone, we unfortunately just cannot get them back.